Before I start speaking to the Governor-General of Australia at Admiralty House in Kirribilli, I want to thank our Indigenous brothers and sisters for walking hand in hand to make this a better country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're on, the camaraderie people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. One of the proudest things I can say about myself is that I am Australian, so it makes me really happy that it's a title I can share with our Indigenous family. Australia is a sensational country, and Australians, on the whole, are sensational people. We don't always agree with each other, but by and large, we respect each other. We work hard, and more often than not, we're good to people. We're tough and loyal, but we're intelligent enough to know when to strike and when to pull our heads in. We're sometimes confused as a nation, though, as we try and make our way across this ruthlessly competitive world we live in today, where sometimes it feels like to be proud of the life you're living, you have to be the best. Just giving life the best crack you can and being proud of yourself, whether you win, lose or draw, doesn't seem like it's good enough anymore. The phrase, good things happen to good people, doesn't seem to be used as much anymore. And a lot of people will tell you that just showing a bit of care, kindness and respect isn't enough to get you ahead in today's world. But the mantra of the most powerful person in Australia right now, the Governor-General, Her Excellency Sam Mostyn, is care, kindness, respect. And like all good leaders should, Sam leads by example. When Sam first took on the role of Governor-General, one of her staff sat her down and asked what she wanted her legacy to be when she finished in the role. She said to him, "I want to have the same relationship with my daughter after serving as Governor-General as I did before." If I had to choose one individual to sum up what modern Australia looks like, that individual would be our Governor-General, Sam Mostyn. And it gives me the greatest privilege and honour of my life to say that the Governor-General of Australia, Her Excellency Sam Mostyn, joins me now on Everyday Greatness. Sam, thank you and welcome, and thank you for inviting us into your home.
Well, Barnaby, there's no one I'd rather have here at Kirribilli on camaraderie land, as you've already acknowledged, than you, given everything you've done over the last 10 years of your podcast on Everyday Greatness. And the joy and privilege is really all mine, because you're one of the people, I think, who exercises care and kindness and generosity and respect wherever you go. And I'm so happy to be sitting here with you today to tell more of that kind of story. But I do have something to say first, don't I?
Fire away.
I'm going to say something that is really important to you, I know, Barnaby. So this is going out to Sophia and Ella Bowers in the village of Ettington, all the way over there in England. Barnaby was one of your dad's best mates in high school, and even though they don't live in the same country anymore, they're a long way apart. Australian mateship, as you know from Barnaby, knows no borders. So I hope you guys are really getting into the Christmas spirit and you're setting up your Christmas tree. It's nice and cold over there. It's pretty hot here today, so I'm happy to be thinking of you putting up all that tinsel and Christmas trimmings in a beautiful cold part of the world. I hope you're there with your mum and your dad and your family have a beautiful Christmas together. And I know that that's really important to Barnaby, given his connection to your dad. So all the best for Christmas from both of us here. And we wanted to start the show by sending out our greetings in that way.
Merry Christmas, Bowers, and thank you. That was beautiful.
It's a pleasure.
Now, let me ask you about being the Governor-General of Australia.
Yeah.
Is this a job you ever held ambition to hold one day? And how did it come about? I'm tipping it didn't just pop up in Seek one day while you were job searching.
A lot of people ask me that question, Barnaby, and some people do think it's one you can apply for or you can sort of think about as you go through your career. Actually, it's a job that came as the biggest shock and surprise of my adult life, because it's the one job that the Australian Prime Minister chooses, and he or she never has to consult with anyone about that. They can make a decision themselves. And in this case, the Prime Minister called me and asked me if I'd be prepared to serve. And I had to talk to my husband and daughter about that, because it's a family thing that I need to be working with, not just myself. So it's a family effort. And we agreed that we'd been asked to serve and it would be the greatest honour to do it. So I said yes, but I never, ever had any kind of ambition for this role. I'm not sure that anyone serving ever would, because I think Prime Ministers look for people who are just out there in the community trying to be the best Australians we can and have a vision and a real sense of optimism for the future of the country.
Now, we just got a taste of it there, but your humility is one of your biggest assets. But do you ever walk around this place at Admiralty House a $150 mansion where you have royals staying quite often and think, I am pretty bloody good?
No, I never think that. Barnaby, I think you know me well enough to know that's probably not the way I think about life generally. A couple of things. This is a magnificent property that we're in here at Kirribilli. There's a second one where I also stay when I'm working in Canberra called Government House at Yarralumla, and it also is a very beautiful home. I don't think of these as our home as a family. I think of them as Australia's homes, and I get to stay in a small part of them when I'm here working. And so I never walk around thinking it's my home or my house. I think about the role I've got to play in ensuring I hold it in trust for all Australians and for the future. And I never think you get to these roles because of some sense of yourself. It's just about contribution. So I think the best thing anyone in high office can do is maintain humility, is always think about others and never get a big head and forget why you're here and get caught up in the trappings of the job just to do the job really well.
So that leads me perfectly to my next question. You have got a lot of success in your life in general, but there seems to be two reasons why. One, you've worked and studied really hard to give yourself opportunities. But secondly, you've just got along with people from all different walks of life and they've presented you with opportunities like the Prime Minister offering you the job of Governor General. Which of those two strands do you think has been more important in the success you've had in life?
I've got a pretty simple view of all these things, and I think it accords with your view of life. It starts with how you're raised and the quality and care of a family. So my mum and dad raised four of us. I'm the oldest of four girls, as you know, and I lived in an army family. My dad was in the army for 40 years and we moved around a fair bit when I was young, and we were in Adelaide with my mum while my dad served in Vietnam for a year. So we learnt as a military family what it was like to have a parent who was serving the country. And in a way, my mum was serving the country by keeping our family together and making sure that we were a happy family and that we followed my dad's career. The values we were brought up with were pretty simple. It was service and a belief that you should always give back more than you take. Absolute humility, never ever getting a big head, never ever treating anyone with anything other than respect. And my dad particularly always felt that you meet every single person on their terms. So you don't enter into any discussion or relationship with an assumption about being more important than someone else, that you respect everybody's story. And, you know, I think being raised in a family where they were the essential elements, respect, showing up, you know, there were quite a few military things, like always turning up early, always having shiny shoes, a classic sort of military term, but not letting people down, volunteering as kids, being part of a community, humility, and always meeting people on their terms and getting to know people respectfully. So to be brought up in a household like that, that's pretty much what I've done all my life. And then I've had the exceptional good fortune of when I've been offered jobs and worked with some of the great mentors of my adult life. They've had very similar values, and I've learnt and listened to people I admire, and you kind of accumulate over a lifetime the leadership traits, the values you see in others, and think, I'd like to be a bit like that, or that makes sense to me, I'd like to be more like that. So I'm constantly learning, and I'm the product of family values and a lifetime of having extraordinary people around me that I learn from, and Barnaby, you're one of them. So we've known each other a very long time, and your spirit about the way you opened this discussion with your enthusiasm, your genuine engagement with what matters in this country, and to then see what you've dealt with over the course of your life, I've learned so much from you, and that's part of the layers and layers of things I think about whenever I'm doing my work. It's a bit of a pastiche or a jigsaw puzzle put together where I've had the extraordinary luxury and gift of being around great people for most of my life.
You're going to make me cry. Right, that's enough deep and meaningful official stuff. Let's talk footy.
Yeah, let's get footy.
AFLW.
Yes.
So you were one of the key drivers in getting the AFL women's competition started. How proud does it make you feel looking at that competition now, where you see young Australian women getting camaraderie, opportunities and networking that was once only the domain of men?
Well, like you, I'm really excited by it. I'm glad we've just got through another season 9, and we're seeing the growth of this game. We're seeing really excited crowds. We're seeing the return to community footy. But most of all, we're seeing respect growing for girls and women who want to play the game just as they always did, alongside their brothers and their fathers and their uncles and their granddads, and where the passage to them to do that had been blocked. And so enormously proud, but I'm really conscious that change takes a lot of people. And I was just fortunate enough as a member of the AFL Commission back in 2005 to be able to listen to the advocacy and the calls by women across the country for a league of their own. And so I think the learning from all of that was I was in a position around that board table to start asking questions and to seek that to become a strategic focus for the AFL. And if you just keep asking for those that see you having a position of authority and power, you take it very seriously. So that was part of a broader group of people who then worked very hard for over a decade to get us to 2017 when we launched the season one. And today I just look at all those women who played football over decades before there was AFLW, and I pay my deepest respect to them because they played in a world where they weren't respected in the same way that men were. And I look at the women in the 10 years since we've had the league, and I look at that incredible sense of athleticism, of competition, and the product, this incredible game, AFLW, that's drawing a whole new set of audiences and tells little girls and boys that your gender does not prevent you having a successful story in footy. That's what I'm really proud of, that we've gotten rid of a barrier that was keeping women out. And that's great for boys and girls and men and women. So enormously proud, and another great season with the Kangaroos this time prevailing after they didn't last year. And great to see some of those teams coming through. And I can't wait to see every season ahead because it's just going to get better and better.
Join in the chorus. So, given all of that, how do you pinch yourself these days when you think of how cool Australia is for young girls growing up here today with all the equal opportunities and the opportunities for women outside of sport, more generally in leadership and the business world and sport and everywhere? How cool is it today?
It is. It's very cool, and things have become much, much better. And I look at my daughter who's in her 20s, and then I look at another group of young girls coming through who are much, much younger. And I think the opportunities there are far greater and there is more equality. But before we pinch ourselves too much and get too excited, we've got to keep reminding ourselves that there's a long game to play here for all forms of diversity and equality. And we've got to work with young men particularly, so make sure there's not a backlash against the rising of women. Because for some, that would feel like the rise of women has come at the expense of men and boys. And I think we have to be really careful to make sure that as we think about equality that brings women to equality with men, that men know that that's been good for them, that boys coming up, younger boys particularly, young men, can see that a world that's equal is great for them. But we need to do a lot more of that explaining and understanding so we don't lose a generation of young men who feel that the rights have all gone to women. And we know that there's still a lot of things that affect women, lack of respect in some cases, violence, family violence, domestic violence. There's still forms of discrimination in workplaces and in some parts of the world where women can't work the same as men. So we will continue to do that and grow over time and be very positive about it. And that's when I get really excited, because if we commit to it together, men and women, girls and boys, those that are non-binary, and just think about the fact that everyone belongs. Everyone has a right to succeed, and we keep dismantling some of those barriers. That's when I feel I can pinch myself when I see equality for all. But everyone's got to be part of that conversation.
That's a very interesting segue to the next question. Modern Australia is a mixture of three very different stories. Yep. Our First Nations people, the British institutions that brought us our constitution and things like Admiralty House, and the multicultural story over the last 50 years or so.
Yep.
How do you get those three different stories that can sometimes be antagonistic to all walk hand in hand to make this a better country?
Well, you're sounding like the Governor General, because which I love, because that's what I've been talking about since I took office on the 1st of July, that Australia has these three incredible advantages that if you see them working in conjunction with one another and supporting one another, suddenly you see a story of a country that has something that almost nowhere in the world has. You've talked about 65,000 years of culture and connection to this continent and its languages and its history, offered to us generously by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for as long as it's been possible. Those British institutions that you described, I would add to things like compulsory voting, an independent electoral commission. Australians, when they cast their vote, can change governments peacefully and successfully. We don't have fights. We don't storm our institutions. We've got a wonderful independent court system, a judicial system, all those things. And then you cap that off with the greatest story of multiculturalism the world has seen, where over the last half century we've seen 7 million migrants become Australian citizens and almost 1 million refugees come to this country ultimately to become citizens. If we treated those three things as interconnecting strengths and talked about it and reflected on it and didn't see them in tension with one another, but totally supporting each other, then you work off that and think about what does the future hold. Because that level of cultural diversity, strong institutions, First Nations history and connection to country and to land, what better start could you have for a discussion about a modern, successful, stable country than that? So I tell that story over and over because I want people to actually focus on the bit of the story that they represent, but also think back through the history of this country and then start thinking productively about what does that mean for modern Australia for the next half century? What will it look like? Who are our future leaders going to be? What are the things that you would change, but what things do we hold fast to? And I think respect for institutions, for civics, for the way in which we discuss things. I talk a lot about care, as you said at your introduction, care for civics and institutions, and care for the way we conduct ourselves in difficult conversations about the things that often split us. Doing that without rancour, without fighting or violence, to me is one of the things we've got to focus on. And I focus on that a lot as the Governor-General, because I think Australia did have a natural advantage. I think we used to argue well. We could disagree well. You could have you could do it around footy grounds, whether it was about the team you supported or something more fundamental, but you'd walk away still respecting the other person and say, that's your view and I respect it. If we don't hold on to that or build that muscle of disagreeing well, that's when we slide into things we're seeing in other parts of the world where you fall into tribes who are fighting with one another and can no longer hear one another. And that would be a great loss for our country. So they're the things I talk about a lot as Governor-General. Let's lift our sights. Let's do that work cooperatively. And even when we disagree, do that well and care about the system that we have with all of those advantages. That makes us a truly mighty nation.
I wouldn't say this myself, but I know a lot of people would say your mantra, care, kindness, respect, sounds a bit soft and fluffy. What are the tangible outcomes people can expect if they take that on in their own lives?
Well, thank you for acknowledging that, because I do think sometimes people hear those words, care and kindness, respect, and think it's soft. And as you say, you and I met through the footy world, and the way I think about it is care and kindness and respect, if to do it well, consistently, is actually very hard. It's so hard that we often don't invest in it, and we forget to care for one another. And there's a huge price we pay by not investing in the structures and the systems that are all about care. So our care system, whether it's our healthcare, our childcare, our elder care, disability care, these are hard systems to maintain well, but they are all centred with care and kindness. So care can be accountable and measurable. It's got to show up and show what the work is that it's doing in a society. And I think that you judge it by the strength of community, by the way in which community can deal with adversity. We see lots of adversity in this country at the moment with cost of living, with natural disasters, those that communities still coming out of recovery from floods and fires. And care is what gets those communities through those moments and gets the country back able to think about the future. So I think that care is the backbone of a strong nation. And I see it wherever I go now as Governor-General, that when you get into community, that is what binds communities. I think care could be at the centre of a footy club's values and mantras. I think care is at the centre of our Australian Defence Force culture and values today. And as the Commander-in-Chief of the Defence Force, as part of my role, I now see the defence leadership from the Chief of Defence down, focusing on whether care shouldn't be at the centre of how we build a strong defence force, because you care for your people. And we know that for veterans families, there have been questions about that in recent years. We've had a Royal Commission into those kind of issues. So when care is absent, things go awry. When care is present and measurable and accountable, and it's demonstrated by leaders, great things can happen. And you know that because you demonstrate it in everything that you do, Barnaby. And in the things we've done together, I think care and kindness and respect for everyone has always been a core set of values. So I will continue to talk about this throughout my 5 years as Governor-General. Wherever I go, I find people are yearning for people, particularly in high public office, to care, to show up and show what does caring really mean. What does listening and learning look like if you really care about a community and want to learn? And so that's my commitment in this job, is just to keep doing that and then amplify the great stories of care back to the nation so that we can all learn from that and be involved in building the backbone of a country that's got care at its centre.
You got to stop pumping my tyres. My head's getting too big. Now, I can't sit with one of the great modern leaders of the world and not ask you some questions about leadership. Outside of Australia, which leaders do you look up to these days?
Well, you're very kind to put me into a world leadership league table. I'm just trying to be the best I can here, Barnaby, and I'm always looking for leadership. I've stopped looking really outside Australia, and I look for leadership within our communities. And the best leadership I still find isn't in a positional sense. It's in communities with people doing remarkable things solving problems at a local level, dealing with issues, particularly in communities that are recovering from whether it's disadvantage or from natural disasters, whatever they're trying to do to build their communities. I see it in our research community, our medical research communities across the country. I see it in our defence force. I see it in our sporting world. I could name hundreds of people who I watch around the country and think are our modern leaders today. And I think we learn more from looking at where things really happen and where there's community, where communities are lifting and dealing with matters, than really at the top of a system. So I'm learning forever. So rather than naming one person, I look for humble, real leadership where people stand for something, they have values at their core, they care for others, they're accountable, they're authentic, they wear their mistakes and understand where they need help from others. They never have to be the smartest person in the room, but they surround themselves with brilliance. They celebrate others. They kind of do what you do, Barnaby. And I think, and I'm not just going to pump your tyres again for no reason, but your leadership and what you've done through this podcast, when you look at everyday greatness and you find people who in their own ways are achieving extraordinary things, that's the leadership I'm paying attention to, because I think we can emulate that, any of us that have a public role. And the more we do that, the more we build trust back into people's sense of those of us in these roles. You know, like most parts of the world, Australia now has a population that trusts less and less people in the institutional frameworks of our country, whether it's CEOs, politicians, maybe governors general. And so what do we need to do to restore that trust? Actually live to a set of values that our communities apply to themselves. And so it's a long way of saying I'm not going to give you a name of someone, because I think it's about the qualities and virtues and the actions of people throughout our community.
Well, I can tell you for certain that everyone trusts the Governors General of this country. Now, tell me about Indigenous leadership. You're someone who's always interested in interesting stories.
Yep.
Adam Goods, Michael O'Loughlin, Cathy Freeman get a lot of limelight, quite rightly, because they're incredible human beings. But who are some of those community leaders that don't get the spotlight on them? Just drop a few names.
Yeah, well, you've named three remarkable Australian Indigenous people, linked probably by sport in the case of Adam and Michael and Cathy. But each of them has gone on to do things way beyond their sport. And we know about those things, whether it's Indigenous education or employment opportunities, and thinking about the future of the country through a lens that actually represents diversity and inclusion. But, you know, there are so many First Nations leaders. I think about some that I spend a lot of time with. And one of them at the moment is Auntie Beryl, who's a leader from Redfern here in Sydney. And Auntie Beryl has been involved in catering schools for First Nations kids, understanding Indigenous food systems. And Auntie Beryl has always thought about her community first. She's now looking at things like aged care for First Nations Australians. And she's someone I can call and have a proper talk about what does eldership mean, what do I need to pay attention to. And interestingly, when the King was visiting Australia just a few weeks ago, Auntie Beryl asked if she could meet the King, and because she had met him and cooked for him as Prince Charles, she'd also cooked for his son, Prince William, when he was in Australia. So she was able to reconnect with him at Redfern at the National Centre of Indigenous Excellence and able to cook for him again. And so that relationship with the royal family for her is very important, but she is very clear about the fact that she's here and representing her people and teaching all of us what it means to be an elder and to always care about a community. I meet people like that right across Australia today, whether First Nations, those that have a cultural background like mine, many multicultural people who are standing up for their communities, lots of young multicultural ambassadors for their communities, many LGBTQI people who speak about their communities. It's, you know, these are leaders that are showing us what does inclusive leadership look like, where everyone belongs and where there's a sense of absolute excitement and optimism about the future, so long as we do include everyone in that journey. So I could keep naming names, but we'll run out of time. But it's not always sporting heroes, although those sporting heroes that you and I have spent a lot of time with often transition into being community leaders and focus on things that are important for the future of the country. And I think that says so much about their leadership beyond sport too.
Now, you won't admit this, but you have a lot of pearls of wisdom when it comes to leadership. For young Australian kids, boys and girls, or non-binary kids, what advice would you give them if they're aspiring leaders but just feel like they're not quite there yet?
I love that question, Barnaby. So at Government House in Canberra, as Governor General, we receive 25,000 young people through the House every year on the schools tours. And they come from every part of the country, remote, regional, rural, city, suburban. And I get a chance when I'm in Canberra to go and spend 10 or 15 minutes with all of those school groups, and they range from mid-primary to towards the end of high school. And I always say, in answer to that question, they always ask that, what's the advice I'd give them? I always say, do study hard, do try, don't give up on school. Follow your heart in the things that you think you're good at and invest in that and keep going. Even if you're not the best at it, you don't have to be the top. You've said this many times, that you don't have to be the very top of anything. Be really proud about the things you get done and don't compare yourself to others. Just do the very best you can. I think young people should always think about volunteering and being part of something bigger than themselves, and to build, again, a muscle strength of being part of a community early on. That's what I learnt as a young girl through my parents about volunteering, about door knocking for important causes. We were raising money back then for the Heart Foundation and the Salvos. Nowadays, and before I took this job, I would go and volunteer and pack boxes at community organisations for people who had food stress. Show up and do things in a community that matter to you, where you can bring something, but what you always get back is something so far greater, a sense of belonging yourself and being part of something and learning from others. So volunteering. I think in Australia, it's good to have a sport. It's good to have a team sport. I think team sports show us the power of working together, the whole versus the one. It teaches about leadership. So if you get to be a captain or a vice captain, that your responsibility for a whole team. You learn how to lose well. So not just how to win well. And sport, I think, in this country still is an important feature in how you learn more than just the things we learn through academic life. And I think it's important for those that have arrived from other countries, that part of being getting to know what it's like to be part of a general community in Australia. Sport's always been a great place to do that, where it doesn't matter where you're from. It's just, are you showing up to play the game or be a competitor? I think always be curious. Never shut down your imagination. Let your imagination and your curiosity take you to things that probably you don't think you're very good at or interested in. I say to people, always listen to great music, whatever music you like, read poetry, read great books, go into art galleries and just look at art. Let art fill you with a sense of awe and wonder about why does someone create a piece of work like this one that we're sitting in front of, to tell us something about their story, and how does it make you feel? And these are things that if we reach out as young people and have a breadth of understanding of the community you fit into, curious, creative, as well as sticking with the things you've got to do to get through school, and find your friends and know that there's a handful of people that will be with you probably for life, that you can always call on. You've known that forever about your mates who are now all around the world, and know that you can always call on those people and always be available to support others and show kindness to those when they need it. I mean, that's a range of things for young people, but I always say to the school groups, I look at them and I see the future of the country. It's a much more diverse future. It's got so much more in it of young people who have different senses of where the country is going, different skills, different connection to the world through the various platforms that they've always had to be connected. Use that for good and be kind, care about each other, have ambition and optimism at the heart of everything you do, and know that if those friendship groups and people you're with are there to take care of you as well. And as you've always said, you don't have to aim to be the superstars. There are always going to be people who might do that, but just doing your very best and feeling proud of that in everything you do, that's a fantastic starting point for most of us. And that's the everyday greatness I know you talk about, Barnaby, and you emulate that. And if more people thought that way and didn't compare themselves to others, people's sense of themselves, of being satisfied and looking out for others, I think would be something that grows. And you take that through your life. I found they're some of the greatest strengths I've had as I've become an adult.
There you go, young people. Leadership 101. Sam Mostyn, sitting having a chat with you as the Governor-General of Australia at your dining room in Admiralty House has been one of the great privileges and honours of my life. I want to thank you so much personally for this opportunity and for having us in your home. But I also want to thank you on behalf of Australians for showing that a bit of care, kindness and respect can get you ahead in life. I just can't thank you enough, Sam, so thank you for joining me.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Barnaby. You're always welcome back here because you've been talking about this for a very, very long time and you live it. I also think that everyone expects those of us that have the absolute privilege and honour to serve in these roles on behalf of all Australians must do that with care and must always have a true north and have at the centre of the work we do in these roles, the ability to listen to community, to take those learnings, to share the great stories of Australia across the country with other parts of the country, and to always ensure that humility and a sense of wonder and curiosity in these roles about what makes us great or what makes the country great is a really important feature of sitting in these roles. You are always welcome to come back, Barnaby. I hope you come back many times, and I hope Australians do engage with the view that the Governor-General's role, I think, in the world we're now in, should have care and kindness and respect at its centre. It should be about being modern and visible and optimistic, and I look forward to doing that over the rest of my 5 years in this office. And I hope to see many, many Australians right around the country, just like you, Barnaby, who are engaged with that, who really tell the story of what our future is going to be full of.
Thank you, Sam. Just be careful. If you're saying come back any time, I might duck around next week for a beer.
You never know your luck, Barnaby.
Well, thank you, Sam. Thank you to the Governor-General's team for pulling this interview together today so professionally and friendly. It's been beautiful. Thank you to my volunteers and crew that have helped me put today on, my film crew, Eliza and Zac, these two are film students at university, but look out for their names in the future because they're going to be a pretty big deal. So just keep an eye out. Thank you to my producer, Julie Watson from Stronger Than My Excuses, for bringing some order into a very, very chaotic world. One of the things that the Governor-General's team offered to us, they said, we have an extra half-hour window. Do you want to use that for something? I said, yeah, I'd love to. I want to switch the cameras off and go and have a cup of tea on the patio with the Governor-General and my family. So thank you for joining us, but we're going to go and have a cup of tea.